President Donald Trump appears in court this afternoon. It will be the second time he faces criminal charges since April, but these federal charges are very different from state charges he faces here in New York.
Hofstra School of Law Professor James Sample joins us now to explain more about today's proceedings. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Mary. Good morning, Chris.
And can you compare the seriousness of this case versus the state charges the former president already faces here in New York?
I think they're both very serious, but these federal charges are on a different level. They're certainly the charges he's facing in New York are significant and damaging and could potentially lead to real consequences for him. But here we're talking about national security secrets. We're talking about obstruction of justice. We're talking about some very, very serious and sensitive information being potentially exposed to people who absolutely were not supposed to have that information. And then the evidence of culpability, the tape recordings saying, you know, I'm not supposed to be able to show you this, but I'm showing it to you anyway, that kind of thing. This does not paint a very flattering picture of the former president. And when you hear former Attorney General Bill Barr, who worked in the Trump administration, saying that if even half of these charges are provable, and he thinks they are, the former president is, quote, toast.
So if convicted of these federal charges, what type of penalties are we looking at here for the former president?
If this were anyone other than a former president, we'd definitely be talking about incarceration, and that is certainly on the table for the former president. It's also certainly possible that if there were to be a conviction on these charges, that the former president would be able to negotiate something because of who he is, house arrest, that kind of thing. But if we were talking about a citizen other than a former president, we'd be talking about significant prison time without a doubt.
And what will happen when Donald Trump arrives this afternoon?
The expectation is he's going to arrive in an underground garage. In federal court, unlike in state court, there are no cameras allowed even inside the building, not just inside the courtroom. So it's not clear whether we're going to get video, and we certainly won't get audio of the proceeding, but he'll have the charges explained to him. He'll enter a plea, and then the expectation is that he will return to New Jersey to give remarks from his Bedminster property tonight.
All right, so some Trump supporters are saying these sensitive documents also found at President Biden's home, and that this prosecution is a, quote, double standard. Let me ask if that's accurate. I mean, yesterday the House Speaker even went so far as to saying, well, they may have been in a bathroom at Mar-a-Lago, but at least there was a lock on the door at Mar-a-Lago, and President Biden's are in a garage.
It's certainly the argument of selective prosecution. This is going to be one of the things that you hear the attorneys argue in the coming months for the former president. His attorneys are, in essence, engaged in a PR battle as much as they're engaged in a litigation battle. That argument won't work in court, but it might work in the court of public opinion. The key difference between the documents that were discovered with former President Trump and the documents, whether it was Vice President Pence or former Vice President, then Vice President Biden, or even former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. The key difference here is cooperation with the investigators, lying to federal Department of Justice officials saying, we've returned all the documents, while you're simultaneously recorded and on tape, and you've got text messages showing that you're actually, not only have you not returned those documents, you're moving them around strategically. Very different things, apples and oranges entirely, but they'll certainly make that argument, Chris.
Now, what do you think he's being charged in Florida rather than Washington, D.C.?
It's a good question, Mary, and I think that the prosecutors made a choice to choose Florida as the venue, given that Mar-a-Lago seems to be the locus of where the documents were located. Now, they did take a calculated risk there, and it may be a risk that they regret taking when you consider that the judge assigned to the case, Judge Eileen Cannon, was a judge who was appointed by the former president after the November 2020 election. She's a very junior judge. She actually issued some extraordinarily favorable rulings for the former president in another case involving the documents that were roundly, completely reversed by the very conservative 11th Circuit. So that, plus the Florida jury pool, with Florida being a key area of concentrated support for Donald Trump, those are challenges that the prosecutors will have to overcome.
All right, Hofstra Law Professor James Sample. Mr. Sample, thanks so much for being with us once again.
Thank you both.
Good to talk with you. We'll have special extended coverage of the Trump indictment on the air and streaming on CBS News New York, including a CBS special news report at 2 p.m. this afternoon. And you can stay up to date with all of the details at cbsnewyork.com.